overview slash review, and this time I've picked on a DVD in my collection that I've had for several years, and it's also one of my favourite, not only one of my favourite Hong Kong films, but is also one of my favourite action films in general. And this is The Killer from 1989. And the director is John Woo, who not only directed A Better Tomorrow a few years earlier, and that's the film that made Chow Yun-fat a star on the big screen after having found some difficulty in transitioning from the small screen. But and he would later go on to direct Chow Yun-fat in Hard Boiled in 1992, and then would go on to direct some Hollywood films, starting with Hard Target in 1993, which starred Jean-Claude Van Damme, Yancey Butler and Lance Henriksen, and Arnold Vosloo, the latter probably best known for playing the mummy Imhotep in The Mummy and The Mummy Returns, as in the films that starred Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz. John Woo also directed Broken Arrow with John Travolta, Christian Slater, and I think it was Samantha Mathis. But and then went on to direct Nicolas Cage and John Travolta in Face Off. But here I'm talking about what I consider to be one of, if not his actual best film that he's ever directed, The Killer from 1989. Now, the killer of the title is actually the character played by Chow Yun-fat, and he plays an assassin for hire who wants to quit the business but is forced to take on one last job in order to fund the corneal transplant of a local singer whom he accidentally blinded in his then most recent hit. So he's forced to take on that one last job to fund that. And then after that, he realizes that the rest of the people around him who are in a similar, let's say, occupation to him are not keen on him deserting and want to make him pay in a very big way. And I think you can guess what that means. The cast also includes Sully Ye and Danny Lee. Now, Danny Lee plays the police inspector who's tasked with trying to find and arrest Chow Yun-fat's character. However, much in the same way that Chow Yun-fat finds himself on the wrong side of the people who he thought were his friends, in a similar vein, Danny Lee's character is finding it hard to dispense justice, essentially because of red tape and that he believes is potentially getting in the way of his police work and causing some problems in him adequately doing his job. So there's a bit of a common ground there, and the two ultimately end up forming an unlikely bond. I won't tell any more about the story than that, but the way it happens is actually quite endearing, and you really do genuinely care for both characters, even though they should be against each other, and yet at the same time they're not entirely against each other. So as well as the film, you also in this particular DVD release, which is from the sadly now defunct Hong Kong Legends, although they got taken over and rebranded as Cineasia. I guess a lot of that was because they started to branch out into other countries besides Hong Kong. Well, because they started to release Japanese films and Thai films and so forth, and I guess Cineasia was a more all-encompassing thing that didn't necessarily restrict it to just films that were produced in Hong Kong or otherwise Hong Kong funded productions. And here's a look inside. That's out of date now anyway. It's just something I never got around to sending off. I may have sent off a similar card from a previous release, but I can't remember now. And here's the back of it. Sorry about the light. As you can see, it inspired no less a person than Quentin Tarantino. Oh yeah, it was Sally. Yeah, she actually plays the singer whom Joanne Fatt the character played by Joanne Fatt accidentally blinds. And there's, amongst other things, there's a very enthusiastic feature-length audio commentary with Bey Logan, who was not only a Hong Kong cinema expert, but also is one of the had at the time at least been one of the few Westerners working actively in Hong Kong cinema. And there's a trailer archive. You get the Hong Kong Legends trailer, as well as the original Hong Kong trailer from back in the day. And they also digitally remastered the picture quality and made the sound Dolby Digital 5.1. And as with pretty much every Hong Kong Legends DVD release, you can watch it either in an English dub or in Cantonese with English subtitles, and the subtitles were not the ones that you saw in the original Hong Kong print. Hong Kong Legends always sought to remove all that, because sometimes those subtitles were so poorly translated and riddled with errors that they caused unintentional humour. So they redid them and got a good balance between something that's a better accuracy, a more accurate translation of what they're actually saying, while finding a balance between that and having subtitles that aren't too frantically paced to read. And I honestly think they managed to get get that right. And going back to what's inside, you got this list of all the different DVD chapters, and this is one of the few Hong Kong Legends DVDs that actually had a reversible sleeve. This is this cover here is the one that was outermost when I originally bought it, but I preferred the look of the other one, so I simply reversed the sleeve. And it's just personal taste. I just prefer this cover over the one that was outermost originally. The actual content of what's on the back is exactly the same. It's just in a different typeface. And there's the DVD itself. I'm hoping that that before too long there'll be a Blu-ray or even 4K Ultra HD, or maybe even both before too long, because I honestly think this film would really benefit from getting that kind of treatment, perhaps. And I'd be absolutely over the moon if a company like, say, 88 Films or Eureka Entertainment, whose Blu-ray releases I've reviewed fairly recently in other videos earlier this year, if they managed to get permission to release such a Blu-ray, oh god, I think lots of people would be doing backflips. If you haven't seen The Killer, if you can stomach some pretty gory violence, then I can highly recommend it, because it is one of the greatest action films you'll ever see, and it does have some real heart to it as well. And even if you've seen John Woo's Hollywood productions and weren't massively impressed with them, I mean, another title of his that I forgot to mention was Mission Impossible 2, as in the second of the Mission Impossible films that had Tom Cruise playing Ethan Hunt. Admittedly, Hollywood forced him to water down his style a little, but this is John Woo without that kind of restriction and on his home turf, and it shows he was able to put more of the kind of thing into his films that that Hollywood would have balked at. He knows exactly when to use his trademark slow motion, and he knows exactly what to do and when. And this is one of the finest examples of his. And Chow Fat is a fantastic actor, and although he's probably best known for roles like this, he has also on his home turf had taken some comedic roles. Probably one of the ones which got any kind of release in the West was one called Tiger on the Beat, in which you see a more humorous side to a role that he plays. The problem is a lot of the humour in the things that he had appeared in, which he does humour, the humour doesn't really translate into for international audiences. So a translation into English or any other language in the world simply wouldn't have worked, because it relies on certain aspects of and certain knowledge of culture and other such things that would leave people outside of those parts of the world scratching their heads. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this review, and if you haven't already seen it, I hope you get to see The Killer somehow. Or if you can, please support legitimate sources and not piracy, because this is honestly a film that you really want to make sure that the people who are responsible for it get their royalties, because it is such a brilliant film. I can't praise it highly enough, and critics have raved about it, and it's rightfully heralded as a classic even 31 years after it first came out in Hong Kong. So anyway, hope you enjoyed this video. Catch you on another one soon. Texie88 out.